All right, let's tackle a huge philosophical puzzle today. How can we, as finite human beings, even begin to use our limited, everyday language to talk about something that's supposed to be infinite, timeless, and completely beyond our experience, like God?
Okay, let's just dive right into the heart of it with a question that has seriously kept philosophers and theologians up at night for centuries. When we say a person is good, we kind of know what that means. But when we say God is good, are we using that word in the same way at all? I mean, what does that really mean?
And this challenge right here is what philosophers call the problem of religious language. It's this deep, fundamental question that pops up the second we try to take words designed for our physical, time-bound world and apply them to a being who is said to exist completely outside of all that. Now, you might be thinking, this is just some abstract thought experiment, but the stakes are incredibly high, for real. If our language about God turns out to be meaningless, then what do we do with the sacred texts of the world's major religions? What about centuries of theological debate? The whole thing risks becoming just unintelligible nonsense.
So the problem really boils down to two key ideas. First, the obvious one, this enormous gap between our existence and God's. But the second one, and this is a really critical piece of the puzzle, is a medieval doctrine called divine simplicity. Now, this says God doesn't just have properties the way we do, like a good person has the quality of goodness. No, this doctrine says God is goodness. God's very essence and his attributes are the exact same thing. And as you can imagine, that makes applying our normal language super tricky.
So, how did modern philosophy try to solve this? Well, one of the first major attempts in the 20th century was also the most radical. The idea was to just declare that all talk about God is completely and literally meaningless.
This whole idea came from a school of thought called logical empiricism, and their favorite tool was this principle of verificationism. The rule was actually pretty simple. If you can't, at least in theory, test a statement through some kind of observation or experience, then that statement isn't true or false. It's just meaningless noise.
Let's see how this works. The philosopher Rudolf Carnap used this very example. If you want to know if the statement, "this key is made of iron," is meaningful, you can devise a test, right? You bring a magnet near it, you see what happens. The statement is verifiable. But here's the thing. You can't exactly do that for a statement like, "God is good."
And the philosopher A.J. Ayer just ran with this idea. He argued that since God's essential attributes are, by definition, non-empirical, you can't see them, you can't touch them, you can't test them, any statement about them is just unintelligible. It's not that it's wrong, it's that it's nonsense.
But here's the amazing twist. Verificationism couldn't pass its own test. Think about it. Philosophers pointed out that the statement, "a statement is only meaningful if it is verifiable," is itself not something you can verify with an experiment. Because of critiques like that, the whole theory was pretty much abandoned, which forced the conversation back to other possible solutions.
Okay, so this brings us to the three major solutions that still dominate this debate today. We can kind of break them all down into a simple question. When we use a word for both God and a person, does it mean something completely different, the exact same thing, or something similar? This really gets at the tension between two goals. Do we want to preserve God's mystery, or do we want to allow for a meaningful relationship with God? This table gives us a perfect roadmap for the whole debate. On one extreme, you've got the equivocal view, which is all about protecting God's mystery. On the other extreme, you have the univocal view, which leans into having a meaningful connection. And then, right in the middle, you've got the analogical view, trying to bridge that gap. So, let's explore each of these.
So, first up, the equivocal view, which was championed by the medieval philosopher Maimonides. He argued that our words mean something completely different when we apply them to God. To preserve God's total otherness, we can't say what God is, we can only say what God is not. This is called the negative way. So, to say that God lives, you have to say God is not dead. This definitely protects God's mystery, but it makes direct praise or description almost impossible. Now, jumping to the modern end of the spectrum, you have William Alston, who proposed a partial univocal view. He said, okay, maybe words like good are different, but some concepts can mean the exact same thing. He focused on functions. For example, both a person and God can perform the function of recognizing something to be best, even if the way they do it is totally different. It's a small door, but it's a door for shared meaning.
But the most famous path, the one right down the middle, comes from Thomas Aquinas. And his logic is really beautiful in its simplicity. It goes like this. We name things based on our experience. We experience the created world. And, just like a painting tells you something about the artist,
Creation tells us something about its creator. Therefore, we can use words from creation to talk about God, but we have to understand they apply in a higher, more perfect, analogous way. And it all comes down to this absolutely brilliant distinction. For Aquinas, the thing signified, the actual concept of goodness itself, is the same for God and for a person. But the mode of signification is totally different. A person has goodness as a quality. But remember that idea of divine simplicity? God is goodness as his very essence. So it's the same core concept, but a completely different way of being it.
So, after centuries and centuries of debate, have we figured it out? Is there a clear winner in this philosophical heavyweight match? Well, the short answer is not really. The reality is, every single one of these solutions comes with its own major baggage. Maimonides' negative way feels way too limiting for things like worship. Alston's view is clever, but it only really works for these very specific, constructed phrases, not the rich words people actually use. And Aquinas' entire system, well, it depends on you buying into a whole medieval metaphysical framework about creators and creation, which a lot of modern thinkers just don't.
So the big takeaway here is that this is not a settled issue. This ancient puzzle is still a living, breathing, and really active topic of debate in philosophy and theology today. There just isn't an easy answer.
And that leaves us with one last, kind of provocative thought. Let's forget about God for just a second. What does this intense, centuries-long struggle to name the unnameable tell us about the power and maybe the profound limits of the language we use to describe our world, our ideas, and even each other every single day?